of the coronavirus. Multiple sources say this may be the costliest government cover-up of all time by China. The belief now, you heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs asked about it, that the intelligence was inconclusive, but there is a growing belief that the COVID-19 virus originated in the Wuhan lab, not as a bioweapon, but as China's effort to find and deal with viruses to show the world China was as good as or better than the U.S. on that front. It's believed that the virus was bat to human, and then the human, patient zero, worked at the lab, went into the population in Wuhan, and the virus quickly spread from there. China, according to sources, moved quickly to shut down travel domestically from Wuhan to the rest of China, but did not immediately stop international flights from Wuhan. These sources say the World Health Organization was complicit from the beginning, helping China cover its tracks, and that is where we begin tonight. Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts starts us off. Good evening, John. You asked about this reporting tonight, got something from the president, and obviously part of the reason why the president's coming down so hard on the WHO.
Yeah, there certainly has been a real change in tone from back in early February when the president described the WHO as some of the best and the brightest. Clearly, as this information begins to develop and is beginning to gain more traction now among U.S. officials, the president is changing his mind not only about the WHO, but about what happened in China. I asked him directly the information that you and I had discussed earlier today. He didn't really go down the road of a concrete answer, but he did suggest that he's looking at that and that is becoming something that the federal government really wants to know a whole lot more about, Brett.
Obviously, China has pushed back about this line. The WHO came out publicly and said they were disappointed in the U.S. decision. But the president appears to be at least warming up to this line of thinking. And really, the origins of this virus become a big, big story if it all pans out, as these sources are saying.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And that's why I asked the president to follow up, because he speaks to President Xi on many, many different occasions. He says he's got a great relationship with him. So I asked the president if in any of the conversations that he has had in recent months with President Xi, or even going back a couple of years, because there is this reporting, which we have confirmed now, that officials from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing visited this virology lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and were concerned enough about a lack of safety protocols there that they cabled back.
With the news that Fox broke last night about the true extent of China's coronavirus cover-up, we at the Ingram Angle felt obligated to tell you, well, we told you so. China's ambitions have never been a secret, yet over the years, our political, media, financial, and yes, our health experts have claimed it was in your best interest to cozy up to the Communist Party. Well, why? Well, so they could make a quick buck and flood our country with cheap imported goods, much to the detriment of American workers. Well, given how devastating this entire COVID-19 pandemic has proven to be, well, I thought it was important to remind you of those who ignored this global danger and dismissed it altogether. I give you the China threat deniers. First, I want to begin 3 decades ago when China was struggling mightily to emerge in the modern world. As the Wall Street Journal's Bob Davis wrote in 2018, it's difficult to remember how economically backward the country was in the early 1990s. Inflation hit 24%. In 1994, nearly 60% of the population lived on less than $1.90 a day. But China had a plan. The nation's Communist Party leaders would woo Western political and economic elites in order to gain access to the powerful World Trade Organization. And one of their key targets was former President Bill Clinton. And their forays, well, they weren't subtle at all. During Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign, there were efforts, some successful, by senior government officials in China to funnel illicit foreign contributions into his coffers of his campaign. Well, just a few short years ago, years later, Clinton was already trying to convince Americans that they needed to welcome China into the global trading community.
America has a stake in China's success, in a China that has overcome the challenges it faces at home, a China that is integrated into the institutions that promote global norms.
Oh, World Trade Organization. Well, 1 year after that, communist pep rally, and with China's position in the WTO secured, Clinton and Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan held a triumphant Rose Garden event.
As China's citizens experience economic gains, so will the American firms that trade in their expanding markets. China's progress towards prosperity and accession into the WTO will create new opportunities for American businesses and farmers.
I believe that Chairman Greenspan has established a pretty good record for knowing what is in America's economic interest.
Oh my God, I can't even listen to that. Well, to be fair, it wasn't just the Clinton administration. Just 2 years later, George W. Bush echoed his predecessor's naive sentiments.
China is on a rising path, and America welcomes the emergence of a strong and peaceful and prosperous China.
Yeah, how did that all work out for us? And then Obama, of course, echoed Bush, like literally.
The United States welcomes the rise of a prosperous, peaceful, and stable China. We want China to do well.
Well, did Do they share notes, or they pass notes along computer to computer? It's crazy. So what did America get out of China's inclusion into the WTO? Well, we've lost millions and millions of manufacturing jobs. We saw our trade deficit balloon, intellectual property ripped off left and right. And meanwhile, China broke its promises to let foreign banks participate in their, in all their business, which they undervalued their currency. We know all that. They got huge margins for years. And you'd think that would upset the titans of Wall Street, like former Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein, right?
China's rise obviously is important for China, but it's important for everybody in the world. I think China's leadership has proven its competence over the last couple of decades.
Well, at least Blankfein defended Trump's tariffs last year, but that was after he had left his position at Goldman, where he had a financial interest in playing nice. Well, all these years later, after all the trade abuses, all that intellectual property theft, all the market manipulations, the provocations in the South China Sea, what they've continued to do to terrorize Taiwan, the World Health Organizations, you would think that the politicians in both parties, especially the ones who will be their party's standard bearers in 2020, that they'd be very clear-eyed now about the China threat we face.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not competition for us.
China's not our problem if we invest and remember who we are.
No, not a problem at all. Look around, Joe. Look at what's happened to America over the last 4 weeks. We lost all of our job gains since the last, of course, recession.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's